"You're the father of my child," she whispered. The single dad had never met her. They laughed when the man in scuffed work boots walked into the Hartwell Foundation gala. "Someone call maintenance," Eleanor Whitmore Stage whispered to the women beside her. I think the help wandered in through the wrong door. The Hartwell Grand Ballroom glittered the way only old money glitters, restored oak panels, hand-leaf ceilings, 400 guests in gowns that cost more than a year of Adam Cole's rent. Adam stood near the entrance in a clean gray suit 2 seasons out of style, his hands rough and nicked. A hospital invitation folded in his jacket pocket. Eleanor pointed with her champagne flute. Her son Bradford smirked. 3 women in diamonds leaned in to share the joke. Adam caught the fragments anyway. Contractor. Doesn't belong. Probably here for the open bar. He didn't flinch. He'd been underestimated his whole life. He simply looked for a place to stand quietly until the ceremony began. Then a woman crossed the entire room toward him, ignoring the crowd, her eyes wet and certain. She stopped close enough that no one else could hear, and she whispered the 8 words that would split his life in 2. "You're the father of my child." Adam stared at her. He had never seen this woman before in his life. What Eleanor Whitmore didn't know was that within a month she'd lose the foundation chairmanship she'd held for 19 years. What Bradford didn't know was that the handyman he was sneering at had personally restored the oak ceiling above his head, the one designers flew across the country to study. And what none of them knew was that the man they'd mocked at the door was the only person alive who could save the child dying 3 floors up in their own hospital. 9 hours earlier, Adam Cole had woken at 5 a.m. with sawdust in his hair and absolutely no idea any of this was coming. The alarm wasn't even necessary. Adam was always up before it. He lay still for a moment in the dark of the small 2-bedroom house, listening to the only sound that mattered, his daughter Sophie breathing softly in the next room. He made coffee. 1 scoop, because the can was getting low, and payday was Friday. He cracked 2 eggs into the same skillet he'd had since his wife was alive, and he didn't let himself think about her for too long, because mornings were the hardest, and there was a lunch to pack. Sophie padded out at 6, 7 years old and missing a front tooth, dragging the stuffed gray rabbit that had survived 4 washings and 1 near-death experience in a parking lot. "Daddy, can we get the good cereal this week?" "We'll see, Bug," which they both knew meant probably not. He buttered her toast and tucked a note into her lunchbox the way he did every single day. "Love you to the workshop and back." Dad. She couldn't read all the words yet. She kept every note anyway, in a shoebox under her bed. He'd found it once and had to step outside for a minute. Adam Cole built things for a living. Furniture, mostly, chairs and tables, and the kind of careful restoration work that took weeks of patience for money that came slow. People who knew wood knew his name. People who knew money mostly didn't. He'd inherited his father's tools and his father's hands and not much else, and 3 years ago, when the cancer took his wife, he'd inherited single fatherhood too, all at once, with no instructions. He drove Sophie to her grandmother's, kissed the top of her head, and headed to the job that had landed in his lap 2 months back, the biggest of his career, and the strangest. The Hartwell Children's Hospital had hired him to restore the century-old woodwork in their renovated wing, and when the foundation saw the finished ceiling, they'd done something nobody had ever done before. They'd invited him to their annual gala. As a guest, with his name on the program. He almost hadn't gone. A borrowed tie and a parking garage he couldn't afford, and a room full of people who measured a man by his watch. But Sophie had looked at the cream-colored invitation on the fridge for a week, sounding out the letters, and said, "They want you, Daddy." So he went. He had no idea that someone else in that building had been searching for him for 4 months. He had no idea that a stranger had already requested his name, his photo, and a vial of his blood, and that everything she'd found had led her, finally, to a hospital gala on a Saturday night. "You're the father of my child," the woman said again, softer this time, as if saying it twice made it more survivable. Adam's voice came out rough. "I think you have the wrong person. I've never met you." "I know." Her hands were shaking. "My name is Maya. Maya Whitmore. And you've never met me, and you've never met her. But 8 years ago you walked into a clinic on Fremont Street and signed a form." The room narrowed to a pinhole. Adam had walked into a clinic on Fremont Street 8 years ago. He and his wife had been drowning. Medical bills, a failed business loan, a winter with no heat. A donor program had paid enough to keep the lights on and a little more. He'd told himself it was anonymous. He'd told himself it would stay a stranger's story, never his. "Her name is Ivy," Maya said. "She's 7. She has your eyes, a breath. And she's sick, Mr. Cole. She's very, very sick." Before he could answer, a manicured hand closed around Maya's elbow. "There you are." Eleanor Whitmore's smile was a blade in a velvet sheath. "Darling, you're making a scene. And with the staff." She turned the smile on Adam like a spotlight meant to make him disappear. "I don't know what my daughter has told you, but whatever it is, we'll handle it appropriately." "Bradford?" Maya's brother appeared at his mother's side, all teeth and tailored shoulders. "Let's not do this here," he murmured to Adam, "the way you'd talk to a dog. There's a room down the hall. We'll discuss arrangements." "There's nothing to arrange," Adam said. "I don't even understand what's happening." "Then let us explain it slowly," Bradford said, "so it lands." The room down the hall had leather chairs and a decanter and a door that closed with an expensive click. Eleanor took the center seat like a throne. Maya stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, refusing to sit on her mother's side. Bradford slid a folder across the table. "My sister made a mistake reaching out to you directly. We've prepared something cleaner." He flipped it open. A check. A number with a lot of zeros. 2 million. You sign the donor consent for the medical procedure, you sign the non-disclosure, and you walk out of our family's life. The child never knows your name. You never contact her. Everyone moves on. Adam looked at the number for a long time. Then he looked at Maya. "What procedure?" "She has severe aplastic anemia," Maya said quietly. "Her bone marrow is failing. She needs a transplant. We've tested everyone. Me, my family, the public registry. No match." Her voice cracked. "A biological parent is her best chance, her only real chance. And you found me. I found you." She finally met his eyes. "I wasn't supposed to. The records were sealed. But she's running out of time, and I stopped caring about supposed to." Eleanor sighed as if the conversation were a tedious meal. "Which is precisely why we're offering a generous sum to a man who is, no offense, a carpenter. You'll be compensated for the inconvenience. Generously. And then this unfortunate chapter closes." Adam stood up. He pushed the folder, the check, the whole tidy $2 million coffin of it, back across the table. "I don't want your money." Eleanor blinked. People did not push the check back. In her experience, no one ever had. "I'll get tested tonight if there's a lab open," Adam said. "I'll do the transplant tomorrow if I'm a match. I'd do it for a stranger's kid." "She's not a stranger's kid." His jaw tightened. "But I'm not signing anything that says I'll never know my own daughter's name. So you can keep your check." "You don't understand the family you're dealing with," Bradford said, the warmth gone from his voice. "No," Adam said. "I don't think you understand the man you're dealing with." Because I've got nothing you can take away, and that makes me the most dangerous person you've met all year." He walked out. He didn't see Maya's hand press against her mouth. He didn't see her smile for the first time in 4 months. What Adam didn't know was that a nurse 3 floors up was, at that exact moment, pulling Ivy's chart and circling a single line. And by morning, the entire balance of power in the Whitmore family was about to shift in ways none of them, not Eleanor, not Bradford, not even Maya, could anticipate. He was a match. The call came at 7 a.m., while Adam was making Sophie's toast. 91%. The transplant coordinator's voice was careful and stunned, the way people sound when they've been bracing for bad news and the good kind arrives instead. They scheduled the harvest for the following week. What followed was not a fairy tale. It was needles and forms and a hospital cafeteria where Adam ate alone while the Whitmore family ate in the donor lounge with the door shut. It was Maya slipping out to find him anyway, 2 coffees in hand, sitting across from a man she'd known for 6 days and a lifetime. "They've cut me off, you know," she said. "My mother said I humiliated the family." She wrapped her hands around the cup. "I used to think the worst thing in the world was disappointing her. What do you think now?" Maya looked toward the elevators, toward the floor where her daughter slept. "I think the worst thing in the world is teaching Ivy that being loved depends on being convenient." Adam thought about a shoebox under a bed, full of notes a 7-year-old couldn't fully read but kept anyway. "Yeah," he said, "I know that one." He didn't meet Ivy. Not yet. The doctors said it was complicated, that consent and contact were tangled, that the family's lawyers had filed something. Bradford had not, it turned out, taken no gracefully. So Adam gave a part of himself to a little girl through a sterile tube in a stranger's IV line, and he went home to his own little girl, and he told no one. Except Sophie pulled the truth out of him the way she pulled everything out of him, sideways at bedtime, with the rabbit under her chin. "Daddy, why are you sad and happy at the same time?" And Adam, who had never lied to his daughter, found he couldn't start now. So he told her, in 7-year-old words, that somewhere in the world there was a little girl who shared something with her, something deep, in the blood and the bone. A little girl who was very sick and very brave. Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then she sat up. "Is she my sister?" Adam's throat closed. "In a way. Yeah, then we have to help her," Sophie said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, as if the whole tangled adult mess of lawyers and checks and pride could be solved by a child who simply knew right from wrong. That's what sisters do. He held her until she fell asleep. Then he sat on the edge of the bed and did the math on what it would cost to fight a family like the Whitmores in a courtroom. The number was bigger than his house, bigger than his truck and his tools and everything he owned, sold twice. He still wasn't going to sign their Nenda. Ivy got better. It was slow. It was scary. There were 2 weeks where it could have gone either way, where Maya didn't leave the hospital, and Adam paced his workshop sanding the same board down to nothing. And then her counts came back, and kept coming back, and one Tuesday a doctor used the word engraftment, and another doctor used the word remission, and a 7-year-old girl with a borrowed immune system asked for chicken nuggets, and everyone in the room cried. It was Ivy herself who broke the family's wall. Because the moment she was strong enough to ask questions, she asked the only one that mattered. Who saved me? Maya told her the truth. Children, it turns out, are not fragile about truth. They are fragile about lies. Ivy listened and thought and then announced that she would like to meet the man whose bones lived inside her now, and also his daughter, who was apparently almost her sister, which Ivy declared was the best thing that had ever happened to her, including the chicken nuggets. Eleanor forbade it. Eleanor, it turned out, no longer had a vote. They met in a park, Adam and Sophie on one bench, Maya and Ivy on another, 20 feet of grass and 8 years of secrets between them. And then Sophie, who feared nothing, walked across that grass and held out her stuffed rabbit and said, "He survived a parking lot. He can survive anything. You can borrow him." Ivy took the rabbit. The two girls sat in the grass with their heads together, and from across the park you could not tell them apart in the things that mattered. The same stubborn cowlick, the same way of laughing with their whole bodies, the same eyes, his eyes. The eyes Maya had recognized in a photograph 4 months before she found the courage to cross a ballroom. Maya sat down next to Adam, not touching. "Close. I never thanked you," she said. "Properly, you gave up $2 million and walked into a needle for a child you'd never met." "I'd do it again," Adam said, "without the part where your mother offered me a check first." Maya laughed, a real one, surprised out of her. "About my mother." Her smile faded. "There's a gala in 3 weeks, the hospital's annual gratitude dinner. They want to honor the transplant program, and my mother is still the foundation chair, and she's still telling everyone you were a paid donor who's been dealt with." She turned to him. "Adam, half that room thinks you took the money and disappeared. The other half doesn't know you exist. Let them think what they want." "No." Maya's jaw set in a way that, for 1 second, made her look exactly like her mother, and then like the opposite of her mother. "Not this time." What the Whitmores didn't know was that the hospital had its own plans for that gala, and the man who'd restored the ceiling was on the guest list again. The Hartwell Grand Ballroom glittered exactly as it had the first time. The same chandeliers, the same 400 guests, the same oak ceiling overhead, restored, anonymous, breathtaking. Eleanor Whitmore stood at the head table in emerald silk, working the room she believed she owned. Adam came in a borrowed tie, with Sophie's hand in his. The program ran long, the way these things do. Speeches and slideshows and a check the size of a door. Then the hospital's chief of medicine took the microphone for the final award, and the lights dropped and a screen lowered behind the stage. "Every year," the chief said, "we honor a donor who exemplifies the spirit of this hospital. This year's choice was unanimous. Some of you have been told a story about this man. Tonight you'll hear the real one." The screen lit up. Ivy's face, gaunt in the first photo, glowing in the last. Then a second image, and a murmur rolled through the room, the very ceiling above their heads with a name beneath it. "Restoration" by Adam Cole. "The man who saved this child's life," the chief continued, "is also the artist who restored this room. He is, by every account I can find, the finest furniture craftsman in this state. And 8 years ago, anonymously, he became a donor to keep his own family warm through a hard winter." A pause. "When we found him to ask if he'd accept tonight's honor, he asked us not to mention the money. So I won't mention that he was offered $2 million to disappear from his daughter's life and that he refused it. Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Cole." The room went silent. Eleanor Whitmore's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Bradford had gone the color of paper. 400 faces turned all at once toward a man in a borrowed tie holding a 7-year-old's hand. The same people who had laughed at him at the door 3 weeks ago were now on their feet. Adam didn't move. He just stood there and let them look, the way he'd let them look the first night, except this time the silence belonged to him. Then a small voice cut through it. Ivy, at the family table, tugging free of her grandmother's grip. She crossed the entire ballroom, slow, careful, still rebuilding her strength, and she did not stop until she reached Adam. She looked up at him with his own eyes. "You're the one," she said. "You're the one who saved me." Adam knelt down to her level, the way fathers do. "You saved yourself, kid. I just lent you some bones." Ivy threw her arms around his neck. Beside him, Sophie wrapped her arms around them both. And 400 people watched a family that no money in the world had been able to buy, sell, or silence simply assemble itself in the middle of a ballroom floor. Eleanor stood frozen at her table. The award. The truth. The $2 million she'd offered to make him vanish, spoken aloud to every donor and board member she'd spent 19 years impressing. Outside, on the terrace, Maya found Adam afterward. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone? About refusing the money? About the ceiling? Any of it? Because I wanted Ivy to know I came for her," he said. "Not for the credit, not for the check, just her." He looked through the glass at the two girls, still tangled together by the dessert table. "Same reason I never told Sophie what those bedtime notes cost me to write." Maya took his hand. This time, she let herself. But the consequences for the people inside were only beginning. By Monday morning, 3 things would happen that none of the Whitmores could stop. By Friday, Eleanor Whitmore was no longer the chair of the Hartwell Foundation. The board met without her. The vote was unanimous, and the reason entered into the minutes was simple: conduct inconsistent with the Foundation's mission. Word travels fast in a small world built on appearances, and the story of a woman who tried to bribe a dying child's father out of existence traveled fastest of all. 3 of her closest friends stopped returning her calls. The next season's invitations did not come. She left 2 voicemails for Maya. Maya did not return them. Some distances, once created, do not close. And Eleanor finally understood that she had spent her whole life building a reputation out of a thing she'd never actually had. Bradford fared no better. The law firm where he was angling for partner quietly removed his name from the candidate list when the Foundation's largest client, a man who had personally been moved to tears at that gala, asked, pointedly, why the firm employed someone who drafted NDAs against children. Bradford spent that week calling old friends. Most were suddenly very busy. He sat alone in his glass office and learned what his nephew Ivy had learned the easy way, and he the hard one, that cruelty is contagious, but so is its isolation. Adam heard about all of it secondhand, from Maya, over coffee in his workshop while sawdust drifted in the light. He didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He just nodded once, slowly, the way a man does when he watches the world balance an account he never asked it to keep. "I hope she finds something real to hold on to," was all he said about Eleanor. Then he went back to sanding a small chair he was building. It was sized for a 7-year-old. He was building 2. 6 months later, Adam Cole woke at 5 a.m., out of habit, not necessity. The house was bigger now, not because of any check, but because 2 custom dining sets and a magazine feature had finally let a master craftsman charge what his work was worth. He made coffee. 2 scoops. The good cereal lived in the cupboard permanently now, and so did a second box, because Ivy slept over on weekends, and Ivy had opinions. He cracked 4 eggs into the same old skillet. From down the hall came the sound he'd built his whole life around, except now it was 2 girls breathing in the same room, in matching beds, the stuffed gray rabbit propped between them like a tiny shared guardian. He packed 2 lunches. He tucked 2 notes. He'd been writing the second one for months, and it still undid him a little every time. Maya came in barefoot, hair loose, and stole his coffee the way she'd been stealing it for half a year. They weren't rushing anything. They'd both been hurt before. Both had daughters to protect. Both knew that the careful way was the only way that lasted. But on the counter sat 4 toothbrushes, and on the fridge hung a drawing of 4 stick figures under a wobbly crayon house. And above it, in Sophie's careful 7-year-old letters, 2 words that no lawyer, no check, and no ballroom full of strangers had ever been able to undo. Our family. The girls thundered out for breakfast, arguing happily about whose turn it was to hold the rabbit. Adam caught Maya's eye over their heads. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Outside, the morning was just beginning to turn gold. Inside, it was warm and loud and a little chaotic and entirely, impossibly real. A family that had started with a whispered sentence across a crowded room, built one careful day at a time by a single dad who'd never met any of them, and somehow, all along, had been waiting for exactly this.